Namaste, my dears. We continue with the study of life and wisdom sharing, and we'll go for the next question. If you want to support, like, comment, or write a question, and we will try to cover it. And the most interesting questions I always try to touch. So let's continue. Vadim, when I look on Instagram and YouTube, everybody likes to speak about spirituality. But eventually, I see people are also happy and everything is joyful, rainbows, traveling. But from my experience, I started the spiritual path and I started to get so many problems, issues, so many things start to unveil. And I don't understand. Am I doing something wrong? Or what is the problem? That's a very good question. If we follow on the Instagram and the flow of spirituality, which is right now what is being translated exactly through the social media, majority of the people who are following this path are, I would say, newcomers. Currently, for myself, I started this path 24 years ago, and through this period of time, there were so many changes, so many ups and downs, and I can tell you for sure, the spiritual path, it's nothing of the rainbow and beauty. It looks beautiful when a person has went through this path and he can speak and share about the wisdoms in such a easy and simple way. But in truth, to achieve such things, great suffering, pain, and transformations had to be gone through. And sometimes you had to go through even death, and the death experience many times, especially when the person is following a shamanic path. So eventually, now what you see in the social media currently with this wave, on one hand, I'm really happy that people are now giving more and more attention towards the spiritual path. But on the other hand, many of them are missing out. That in the spiritual path, there's a beginning, which can start with all this rainbows and butterflies and light. But then eventually comes a point when a person starts to look inside of themselves. Many start to speak about it as shadow work. It is when you start to acknowledge life, you start to learn that it's not only good and bad, but that life consists of these two at the same time. And there is no God and devil. They're the same, they're one. So it's like a coin with both sides. And eventually, if you want to study the light, it will be impossible to study it without understanding the darkness. And in my path, I had the similar aspect that in the beginning, when I started the spiritual path, I studied everything about the good, the light. I did spiritual practices, which, let's say, were very positive, uplifting. And then after 10 years, I came to a point when I reached the age, and a very unique spiritual experience was organized for me when I went for the first time to the Himalaya mountains. I had a travel, and it started from Delhi, then Haridwar and Rishikesh. Rishikesh, that's the place where were the Beatles based in the 50s and 60s, and they had their ashram. And from there, I started the journey towards Yamunotri, Gangotri, Kedarnath, and Badrinath. These are the four most holy places in India, which every Indian person should visit at least one time in their lifetime. And usually people go for this journey when they're old, as it's a blessing, an unbelievable blessing if you have went to these places, and it's a blessing if you visit them, or it's a blessing if you die along this way. Because if you die along this way, then you can be cremated in the place where the Ganga starts to flow in the Prayaga, and eventually your soul will go to the highest realms of the spiritual reality. So, for that reason, this was a very strong journey, and maybe one day I'll share more details about it. And it happened almost 14 years ago, and yeah, in that journey happened such experience when from all this perfect butterfly, beauty lights, this warrior of light, and with all of these practices, the limitations, and such a developed spiritual ego, I went there and got such a hardcore experience of darkness, which eventually took me years to understand the true gift of light that it has given to me. And eventually, after that experience, in a couple of years, I opened my and took in my essence of the shamanic path. And I let go of the study of religions and I followed the path of the shadow. The shadow is often going into the void or the unknown when you step there where nothing exists, but it always exists when you make this step. So eventually, the true spiritual seekers who go to the essence, they will be always tested by themselves, by their higher self, which will show all of the things which are inside of us that we need to transform, to see. We cannot ignore and focus only on the light without working through the pain inside, the sorrow inside, the illusions inside, and many of us live in a dualistic illusion of reality, in dividing good and bad. And there are some very extreme spiritual practices which guide the fastest way to enlightenment, which you can find until today in the Himalaya mountains. But this is again a separate topic. So, answering your question, the true essence of the spiritual path can start with the light, but then eventually the light will show you that it exists through the darkness, and that from the darkness comes the light. For example, we have the sun, we can see the light from it, and we have the black holes. And the black holes, scientists start to say that they're the black suns, that their actually energy is so tight and so strong that they don't allow the light to come out, but they take in all of it. So eventually, through the darkness comes the light. And the same reflection we can see if we go to a dark room and it becomes very dark, we start to see light spots in our eyes or inside of our consciousness, and vice versa. If we start to look on the sun and it's very bright, we start to see black spots. So this is all the reflection of this game and wisdom that we're studying here as man and woman energy, the aspect of the material and the spiritual, the aspect of creation and destruction. So this is the beautiful game of wisdom that all of us are here playing. So if you're truly on the spiritual path, you have to know that you have to be ready, you have to be patient, and I highly recommend to do practices which will prepare your consciousness for the challenges ahead. And I highly recommend to try to find for yourself a person or friends or people who are sincerely following this path so you can share your burdens, share your experience, get your feedback, and of course, the most biggest blessing if you truly find your spiritual teacher. In the Veda books, it is shared that people who find their true spiritual teacher, they did something unbelievable, important, and beautiful from a karma sense and point in their past lifetimes. Because finding the right guru or teacher or teachings and knowledge and wisdom can help to avoid a huge amount of waste of time into the things which don't bring the results which the person seeks for. But at the same time, everything is a path. For me, in my spiritual path, every person was a teacher. I didn't have a specific guru or a teacher. My biggest teacher was life. And that's why I inspire everybody who doesn't have a teacher. Don't worry. Your life and all people around are your greatest teachers. Just observe, analyze, and keep a critical mind. And for this work, I highly recommend lead a diary. Be for yourself the mirror and study yourself through the mirror of light that you're living. And then the path will become light, even in the darkest hours of reality. Namaste.